Once upon a time, in a cozy neighborhood in Charlotte, North Carolina, lived Emma Reed, a 27-year-old nurse who everyone said was the sweetest person you'd ever meet. She smiled at every neighbor, covered extra shifts when coworkers asked, and never said no to anyone, even when she wanted to scream yes to herself. Emma was what people called a giver, but behind her kindness was exhaustion, the kind that seeps into your bones when your life revolves around keeping everyone else happy. Her mom expected her to visit every Sunday. Her friends expected her to plan every hangout. Her boyfriend, Chris, expected her to always be available, even when she needed space. And Emma expected herself to never disappoint anyone. Late one night after another double shift, she sat in her car in the hospital parking lot, too tired to move. The rain tapped against the windshield, and for once, there was no one around to need her. She whispered, "When do I get to live my life?" The silence that followed was heavy, but it was also honest. It was the first time Emma had truly asked herself what she wanted. When she got home, she took out an old notebook and wrote on the first blank page, "Today, I realized I've been living for everyone but me." She stared at the words for a long time and then underlined them twice. For the first time in years, she wasn't making a list for someone else. She was starting one for herself. It was the quiet beginning of a loud awakening, one that would change everything. The next morning, Emma stood in front of her bathroom mirror, pale, tired, and running on caffeine instead of rest. Her reflection looked older than her age, her smile forced, her eyes dim. She didn't hate herself. She just didn't know herself anymore. For years, her life had been a constant performance. The nice girl, the reliable daughter, the perfect girlfriend. Every role was scripted by someone else, and Emma had memorized her lines too well. But now, staring into her reflection, she whispered, "Who am I when no one's watching?" She didn't have an answer. That question followed her all day, through the hospital halls, through polite conversations, through the moments she wanted to say no but said yes anyway. During her lunch break, she sat outside on a bench near the hospital garden. An older nurse named Donna, who had always been kind but blunt, sat next to her. "You look worn out, honey. You gotta start saying no sometimes." Emma smiled weakly. "I can't. People count on me." Donna sipped her coffee and said, "People will always count on you until you stop counting on yourself." The words hit her harder than she expected. That night, she looked at herself in the mirror again, the same tired eyes staring back, but this time, there was something else there. A spark. She picked up her notebook and wrote, "I want to live my life, not the version other people approve of." Then she underlined one word 3 times. Me. It was small, almost invisible to the world, but to Emma, it was the first act of rebellion. And once that spark of self-awareness lit, there would be no putting it out. Emma started noticing things she had ignored before, tiny ways she gave her time, her peace, herself away. When her mom called and said, "Can you come by tonight? I need help with the garden," Emma automatically said yes, even though she had planned to rest. When her coworker asked her to swap shifts again, she smiled and agreed, even though she'd already worked 10 days straight. And when Chris texted, "You don't mind if we skip that movie you wanted to see, right?" she replied, "Sure, whatever you want." That night, sitting alone in her small apartment, she realized she didn't remember the last time she'd done something just because she wanted to. She opened her notebook and wrote, "Every yes I give someone else takes a piece of me." At work the next day, Donna caught her zoning out. "Long shift?" she asked. "Long life," Emma muttered. Donna chuckled. "You've got a big heart, kid, but you keep handing out pieces of it like free samples."
Emma laughed softly, but the truth of it lingered. That evening, she tried something new. When her friend Megan called to invite her to a last-minute dinner after work, Emma hesitated, then said, "Actually, I'm staying in tonight. I really need rest." There was silence on the line. Then Megan said, "Oh, okay. Good for you." The world didn't collapse. No one was angry. The sky didn't fall. She hung up and sat on her couch, shocked at how liberating one small no felt. She smiled and wrote in her notebook, "Every time I say no to someone else, I'm saying yes to me." It was only one no, but it was her first real step toward freedom, and it felt incredible. The next morning, Emma woke up feeling lighter, for about 5 minutes. Then it hit. That familiar guilt. The quiet, sneaky kind that whispers, "You're selfish. You disappointed someone. You should have just gone."
By the time she poured her coffee, her mind was spinning. What if Megan thought I didn't care? What if Mom gets upset? What if I'm becoming a bad person? Guilt had always been her emotional leash, tugging her back every time she tried to step toward independence. At work, she couldn't focus. The old nurse, Donna, noticed again. "You're quieter than usual," Donna said. Emma sighed. "I told my friend no last night, and now I just feel awful about it." Donna smirked. "You feel guilty for resting? Honey, that's not kindness, that's conditioning." Emma blinked. "Conditioning?" Donna nodded. "You've spent so long tying your worth to what you do for others that you don't know who you are without that approval. The guilt isn't truth, it's a habit." That night, Emma thought about it deeply. She sat on her bed, staring at her notebook. Then she wrote, "Guilt is the ghost of the old me, the one who lived for everyone else." She decided to test herself again. Her mom called, as always. "Can you come by tonight?" Emma took a breath. "Not tonight, Mom. I'm really tired." There was a pause, long enough to make her stomach twist. Then her mom said, "Okay, sweetie, rest up." That was it. No drama, no disappointment. After hanging up, Emma exhaled, smiling through tears. She realized the guilt didn't mean she was doing something wrong. It meant she was finally doing something different. And for the first time, she understood. Peace feels uncomfortable at first, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. She closed her notebook, looked out her window, and whispered, "I think I'm finally learning how to live." Saturday arrived. Gray skies, quiet streets, and for once, no plans. No brunch with friends, no errands for her mom, no waiting around for Chris to text. Just Emma. At first, it felt strange. The silence in her apartment was almost too loud. She paced a little, checked her phone, scrolled through social media, then stopped. Every post was someone doing something, hanging out, traveling, smiling with friends. For a moment, that old panic crept in. Should I be out too? Am I wasting my weekend? Then she caught herself. That voice wasn't hers. It was the world's. She put her phone face down and looked around her little apartment, plants on the window ledge, art prints she loved, the smell of coffee in the air. It was hers. Quiet. Safe. She made pancakes just for herself, with blueberries and too much syrup. She played her favorite music loud, sang off-key, and danced barefoot in the kitchen.
No one to judge, no one to please. By afternoon, she curled up on the couch with a book she'd bought months ago but never read. As she turned the pages, she realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd done something simply because it made her happy. Around sunset, she went for a walk around her neighborhood. The sky glowed orange, kids rode bikes, and for once, she wasn't rushing anywhere. She thought to herself, maybe this is what it means to be enough. Right here, doing nothing special, just being me. That night, she wrote in her notebook, "Today, I was my own company, and it wasn't lonely. It was peaceful." Then she smiled and added underneath, "I don't need noise to feel alive." It was her first real weekend living for herself, and it felt like coming home to someone she'd been missing her whole life. The next week, reality caught up. People had started to notice that Emma was different, quieter, less available, less eager to please. Her mom called one evening saying, "You've been distant lately, sweetheart. Is everything okay? You barely visit anymore." Emma hesitated. "I'm okay, Mom. I'm just trying to take better care of myself." Her mom sighed softly. "I just don't want you to forget about family. That's all." The guilt returned like an old reflex, sharp and fast. But this time, she didn't let it drive the conversation. She said, "I'm not forgetting. I just need balance." Later that week, her boyfriend Chris started complaining too. "You've changed," he said one night. "You used to be more supportive. Lately, it's like you're pulling away." "I'm just trying to make time for myself," she replied carefully. He frowned. "Yeah, but what about us?" Emma wanted to say, "I've been making time for us for years." Instead, she just smiled faintly. "I still care, Chris. I'm just learning how to care for me, too." He didn't seem to understand. Maybe he didn't want to. That night, Emma sat on her couch with her notebook and wrote, "When you start living for yourself, people who benefit from your self-neglect will call it selfish." She looked around her quiet apartment. No noise, no pressure, no one demanding her time. For once, it wasn't lonely. It was liberating. She wrote one last line before bed. "The right people won't be threatened by my peace. They'll celebrate it." As she turned off the light, she realized something both scary and empowering. Living for herself might cost her some relationships, but losing people who only loved her when she said yes wasn't really losing at all. It was clearing space for something real. By the next month, Emma's world felt like it was shifting beneath her feet. Her new boundaries were working, but they were also being tested. Chris had grown distant. Her mom kept making little comments about how she used to be so helpful, and even her coworkers teased her about finally acting selfish. One Thursday night, after another long day of work, Emma came home to find Chris waiting outside her apartment. He started talking before she could even take off her coat. "I don't know what's going on with you. You're cold. You don't prioritize us anymore. You're not the same person I fell in love with." Her heart pounded. She had rehearsed this moment in her head 100 times, but now that it was here, her throat tightened. "I'm not the same," she said softly. "That's kind of the point." He frowned. "So what? You just don't care anymore?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I care. I just finally care about myself, too." He shook his head. "You've changed too much."
Later that night, she wrote in her notebook, "For years, I connected by giving parts of myself away. Now I'm learning to connect by simply being me." She realized that when you stop living for others, you don't lose connection. You just start attracting truer ones. That small conversation at the market reminded her, the world doesn't stop when you live for yourself. It just becomes more real. And for the first time, Emma was ready to meet it as herself. As Emma grew more comfortable in her new skin, she discovered one of life's hardest skills, the graceful no. Her old self used to say yes automatically, like it was muscle memory. But now she paused before agreeing to anything. Every request passed through a quiet filter. Do I want to do this, or do I feel guilty saying no? The first test came at work. Her supervisor asked if she could cover yet another weekend shift. The old Emma would have said yes before the question finished. Instead, she took a breath and said, "I can't this weekend. I need that time for myself." Her supervisor blinked, surprised, then simply said, "All right, I'll ask someone else." Emma walked away smiling. It was so simple, so anticlimactic. The world didn't fall apart. She didn't lose respect. She just kept her weekend. Then came her mother. "Sweetheart, can you drive over tomorrow? I need help moving some boxes." Emma glanced at her own plans, a yoga class, and a quiet afternoon she'd been looking forward to all week. She hesitated, then answered gently, "I can't tomorrow, Mom, but I can come by Sunday." Her mother paused, then sighed. "Okay, Sunday works." Emma exhaled in relief. Maybe boundaries didn't destroy relationships. Maybe they simply redesigned them. That night, she opened her notebook and wrote, "Every no I say without apology builds a bridge back to myself." She began practicing saying no out loud. Not rude, not cold, just clear. "No, I can't." "No, that doesn't work for me." "No, thank you." Each time it got easier, lighter. And soon she noticed something beautiful. Her yeses started to mean something again. Weeks passed, and Emma began to feel something she hadn't felt in years: confidence. Not the kind that came from compliments or approval, but the quiet kind that comes from self-respect.
She noticed it in small ways. She walked straighter. She spoke slower. She stopped apologizing for existing. At work, she volunteered for projects she actually wanted to do, not just the ones that needed doing. She even suggested an idea for improving patient scheduling, and when her manager praised it, she didn't deflect with, "Oh, it was nothing." Instead, she smiled and said, "Thank you, I'm proud of it." After years of shrinking herself to make others comfortable, Emma was finally taking up space. One afternoon, she ran into Ben, the artist from the farmer's market, at a local cafe. He waved her over and said, "Hey, it's good to see you again. You look peaceful." She laughed. "That's new for me." They talked for a while. It wasn't flirtation or small talk. It was genuine conversation about boundaries, burnout, and learning to stop apologizing for being human. When he said, "You seem like someone who's finally learning how to live for herself," Emma smiled quietly. "Yeah, it took me a long time to realize that wasn't selfish." That evening, she wrote in her notebook, "Confidence isn't walking into a room thinking you're better than anyone. It's walking in without needing to compare at all." She was learning that real confidence had nothing to do with being perfect and everything to do with being honest. And maybe, just maybe, that honesty was starting to make her shine. As the weeks rolled on, Emma began to realize that healing sometimes required space, not to punish others, but to protect herself.
Her mom still called often, but now their conversations were shorter, calmer. Emma no longer felt the need to explain every boundary. "I can't today" was enough. Surprisingly, her mom began to adjust, even respect it. But one relationship still lingered in the gray. Chris. Every so often, he'd text, "Hope you're doing okay," or "Miss talking to you." It tugged at her heart, but she didn't reply right away. She was still figuring out how to exist without falling back into old patterns. One Sunday morning, she sat at a small diner, sipping coffee alone, when her phone buzzed again.
It was Chris. Can we talk? I think I finally understand what you were trying to say. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She took a long breath, then typed, maybe someday. But right now, I'm still finding myself, and I need to do that alone. She hit send, and for the first time, there was no heartbreak, just peace. That afternoon, she went for a walk at Freedom Park. The air was warm, the lake shimmered, and kids were laughing somewhere in the distance. She sat on a bench, watching the water ripple, and thought about how different she felt now. Lighter, grounded, whole. She opened her notebook and wrote, "Not every distance means disconnection. Sometimes space is love in disguise, love for yourself." As the sun began to set, she whispered softly to herself, "I'm finally learning to be okay without being needed." That simple truth felt like freedom, the kind that doesn't come from running away, but from finally standing still in your own life. Spring arrived in Charlotte, and with it came something Emma hadn't felt in years, joy that didn't need permission. She started noticing beauty again, morning sunlight on her window, the hum of the coffee maker, the sound of rain against the roof. Little moments she used to rush through now felt like gifts. Her coworkers began teasing her. "You're glowing lately, Emma." She just smiled. "I guess I finally stopped running on empty." On weekends, she filled her time with things that made her heart expand. Hiking nearby trails, taking a pottery class, and visiting the farmer's market again. Sometimes she bumped into Ben, and they'd chat for a few minutes before parting ways. There was no pressure, no pretending. Just two people living their own lives and occasionally crossing paths. One afternoon, as she shaped clay on the wheel in class, she realized how similar it felt to shaping her new life. Messy, uncertain, but beautifully hers. Later that night, she wrote in her notebook, "Joy doesn't return all at once. It sneaks back in when you finally stop living for everyone else." That weekend, she did something spontaneous. She drove out to the mountains. No plan, no company. Just herself and her playlist.
She stopped at scenic overlooks, took pictures, laughed out loud to songs she loved, and ate fries in the car with the windows down. Halfway up a hill, she pulled over, stepped out, and looked at the world stretched wide beneath her. The wind brushed her hair, and she whispered, This is what alive feels like." It wasn't dramatic or cinematic. It was quiet, honest joy. The kind that comes when you stop asking the world for approval and start giving yourself permission to be. By now, Emma had grown used to her own company, and even cherished it. The girl who once couldn't stand silence now craved it. The woman who once feared being alone now saw solitude as sacred, her daily reset. On a quiet Friday night, she turned down 2 invitations, one from co-workers for drinks, another from an old college friend passing through town. She ordered Thai food, put on her favorite playlist, and painted her nails while dancing around the living room. No makeup, no expectations, just her. When she finished eating, she curled up on the couch and opened her journal, smiling as she flipped through old pages. She saw her first entries, the guilt, the heartbreak, the exhaustion, and realized how far she'd come. "I used to think being alone meant no one wanted me. Now I know it means I finally want myself." The next morning, she went for a walk in the park. Couples passed by, parents pushed strollers, friends laughed together. And yet, Emma didn't feel like she was missing anything. She wasn't lonely,
She was whole. Halfway through the walk, she sat on a bench under a blooming dogwood tree and closed her eyes. She felt the sun on her face, the breeze on her skin, and this soft, still voice inside her whisper, "You're okay now. You finally belong to you." That afternoon, she texted Donna a simple message. "Thank you for everything you said to me that day. You were right. Saying no didn't make my world smaller. It made it real." Donna replied, "I knew you'd get there, kid. The best version of you was never gone. She was just waiting for permission." Emma smiled at her phone, heart full. That night, she lit a candle and wrote one last note before bed. Solitude isn't emptiness. It's freedom with a heartbeat. And for the first time in her life, she didn't fall asleep wishing for anyone else. She simply whispered, "Good night, me." By midsummer, Emma noticed that her strength no longer shouted, it stood still.
It wasn't the kind of strength that needed to prove anything. It was the kind that let her walk away from drama without explaining, set boundaries without guilt, and smile without needing validation. Her coworkers had started to come to her for advice, not because she said yes to everything, but because she finally spoke with clarity. When one of them asked, "How did you get so calm all the time?" Emma laughed and said, "I stopped trying to fix everything that wasn't mine to fix." Her words surprised even her. A year ago, she couldn't go a day without worrying what people thought. Now she chose peace over approval, every time. That weekend, she visited her mom. For once, their time together felt easy. They cooked, laughed, and talked about little things. At one point, her mom said, "You've changed, Em. You seem happier." Emma smiled softly. "I am. I think I finally figured out that love doesn't mean losing yourself." Her mom reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Took me a long time to learn that too." That simple moment, two women recognizing each other not as expectations, but as individuals, brought tears to Emma's eyes. That night back home, she wrote in her journal, "Real strength isn't loud. It's knowing what to walk away from and what to walk toward, quietly." Then she looked around her cozy apartment, the plants thriving, the walls painted in colors she chose, the peace she once thought was impossible, and whispered, "I did it." For the first time in her adult life, Emma wasn't surviving other people's stories, she was finally writing her own. The months that followed were soft, slow, and steady. The kind of calm that once scared Emma, but now felt like home. She had fewer people in her life, but every one of them was real. No pretending, no performing, just presence. One evening, she sat at a downtown cafe sketching in her notebook, when she heard a familiar voice. "Emma!" She looked up. It was Chris. He looked the same, but somehow smaller, like he was still carrying the weight she had finally put down. They exchanged polite smiles and sat for a few minutes catching up. He talked about work, his new apartment, and how he'd been trying to figure things out. When he finally said, "You seem different," Emma smiled gently. "I stopped living for everyone else. It turns out that's where peace was hiding all along." He nodded, eyes soft. "I didn't get it back then." "I know, neither did I." When they parted ways, there was no sadness, just gratitude. He had been part of her story, but not her destination. As she walked home, the city lights reflecting in puddles, she realized something simple but powerful. She didn't owe anyone her old self. That night, she poured tea, lit her candle, and wrote in her journal, "Freedom isn't a one-time act. It's a choice I make every day to keep my soul my own." She looked around her apartment, the same space that once felt too quiet, and smiled. The silence that used to echo now sang. Emma had learned that living for herself didn't mean closing her heart. It meant opening it in the right direction, inward first. And that was the kind of freedom she would never give back. Autumn came softly, painting Charlotte in amber and gold. For Emma, it didn't feel like another season. It felt like a new life. Her days flowed differently now. She worked fewer shifts, joined a weekend art class, and spent Sunday mornings in quiet cafes writing or sketching. She was still the same person, just no longer edited to fit anyone's expectations. One crisp Saturday, she returned to the farmer's market she loved. Ben the artist was there again, his table lined with watercolor skies and forest scenes. "Hey, stranger," he said, smiling. "I haven't seen you in a while." Emma laughed and said, "I've been busy, living."
They talked easily, like old friends. He mentioned he was hosting a small local art show and invited her to come. "Not as a guest," he added. "You should bring some of your drawings." Emma blinked. "Me? I'm not—" He interrupted gently. "Yes, you are. You're an artist. I can tell." That night, at home, she sat at her table flipping through her sketches, moments she'd captured during her journey: trees, sunsets, hands holding coffee cups, the outline of a woman standing tall. She realized something she hadn't noticed before. Every drawing was a quiet self-portrait of growth. She wrote in her notebook, "When you stop living for others, you don't lose yourself. You meet yourself." She smiled, closing the book. Tomorrow she'd go to the art show. Not to impress anyone, not to prove anything, but simply because she wanted to. As she turned off the light that night, she whispered into the soft dark, "I think this is what my life was waiting for. Me." The day of the art show arrived, clear and bright. Emma woke up nervous but excited, the kind of butterflies that meant something mattered. She packed her sketches carefully into a portfolio and headed downtown. The community art space buzzed with soft music and warm laughter. Paintings, photographs, and handmade crafts lined the walls. When she set up her small display, 6 framed sketches titled "Becoming Me," she stepped back and smiled. Each one told a chapter of her story: the exhaustion, the loneliness, the healing, the peace. As people wandered by, she heard quiet comments. "These feel honest. I love how calm they are. It's like she's painting self-respect." Ben stopped by and grinned. "See? I told you." Later that evening, a woman about Emma's age approached her. "Your art, it feels like freedom," she said softly. "I've been stuck in everyone else's expectations for years. Looking at these, I think I want to find myself again." Emma's throat tightened. "You can," she said. "It starts with one decision: to stop apologizing for being you." The woman smiled, tears in her eyes, and walked away holding one of Emma's prints. That moment hit deeper than anything else had, because Emma realized she hadn't just learned how to live for herself, she was now helping others do the same. That night she wrote in her notebook, "The light you find within yourself becomes a lantern for others." She sat in silence, candle glowing beside her, heart steady. The girl who once bent herself into everyone's expectations was gone. In her place stood a woman who had learned that self-love wasn't rebellion, it was returning home. Emma looked at the empty page after that line, smiled softly, and whispered, "Maybe I'll call this new chapter of my life peace." A few weeks after the art show, life tested Emma one last time, just to see if she truly meant what she'd learned. Her hospital offered her a promotion, assistant head nurse. It came with a big pay raise, a private office, and the promise of endless hours, late nights, and stress. Everyone congratulated her, co-workers, her mom, even Donna. "You'd be perfect for it," they said. But Emma hesitated. She spent the night thinking, pacing, journaling, sipping tea. The old Emma would have said yes immediately. She used to define her worth by achievement, but now she knew better. She looked at her reflection in the window, calm,
confident, at peace, and whispered, "If it costs my peace, it's too expensive." The next morning she met with her supervisor. "I'm honored," she said sincerely, "but I have to decline." Her boss blinked in surprise. "May I ask why?"
Emma smiled gently. "Because I finally love my life the way it is. I have balance now, and I don't want to lose that for a title." Her boss nodded slowly. "Most people wouldn't turn this down." "I know," she replied, "but most people are still living for everyone else." Walking out of that office, she felt no regret, only clarity. It was the same kind of peace she had fought for, cried for, built piece by piece. That night, she opened her journal and wrote, "Success means nothing if you're a stranger to yourself. The world can wait. My soul can't." She closed the book, smiling through quiet tears of pride. She had finally proven to herself that self-worth didn't come from saying yes to opportunity. It came from saying no when your heart whispered, "Not this one." And for the first time, she didn't just believe in herself, she trusted herself. A year later, Charlotte was blooming again. Soft skies, coffee shops alive with chatter, the hum of a new season. And in a quiet corner of that city, Emma Reed sat at her small balcony table, sketchbook open, tea steaming beside her. Her life looked simple, but it was hers. She still worked at the hospital, still drew in the evenings, still walked to the market on weekends. But the difference was invisible to the eye and unmistakable to the heart. She no longer lived for applause, approval, or expectation. She lived for peace. Sometimes people asked her, "Aren't you afraid of missing out?" And she would smile and say, "I already missed out on years of myself. I'm not doing that again." On Sundays, she called her mom just to talk, not out of guilt, but out of love. She kept in touch with Donna, who now called her the calmest nurse on the floor. And sometimes she'd meet Ben for coffee, two artists who once met by chance, now old friends who didn't need to fill silence to feel connected. Her apartment had become a reflection of her soul, uncluttered, warm, full of life. On the wall hung one framed sketch from her art show, a woman standing barefoot under sunlight, arms open, face tilted toward the sky. Underneath it, she had written a single line, "The day I stopped living for everyone else, I started living." That night, as she journaled by candlelight, Emma wrote her final entry. "You don't lose people by finding yourself. You lose fear, guilt, and the need to perform. The world doesn't end when you start saying no. It simply reshapes itself around the truth of who you are." She closed the journal and looked out at the stars. No noise, no expectations, just her, whole, honest, free. And as the city breathed around her, Emma whispered one last thought, not to the world, but to herself. "I'm proud of you. You finally came home."